You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the SDSU Football Podcast. I am Andre Hagverdian, and with me, as always, is Paul Garrison. Our guest today is offensive line coach at San Diego State, Mike Goff. Goff, a 12-year NFL veteran and 2005 All-Pro, is entering his second year as the Aztecs offensive line coach. We want to welcome Mike Goff, the offensive line coach at San Diego State. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me. It's always good to get a chance to talk ball with people.
Yeah, looking back at the season that just ended, 2021, it was a historic season, 12 wins. How would you assess the play of the offensive line, and is there an aspect you wish the offensive line could have performed better in?
Well, I think that one of the things about me is I've always been my biggest critic, and so looking back at the season, there's a lot of things I do wish we could have been able to achieve that would be different. But the thing about it is you get a chance to look back, so hopefully history doesn't repeat itself. What I'm most proud of is how hard these young men work together, and it wasn't always the prettiest of scenarios, whether it was COVID or whether it was just dinged up or however things were happening. I think that the most important thing is that these kids worked hard and they did a nice job of doing what we set out. One of the goals is as an offensive unit, you want to lead by example in both practice and in the games by trying to be the toughest guys out there and being the guys who are going to go out there and lead by example. And I think they tried to do that each and every game. And so that's probably what I'm most proud of and what we were able to achieve. And, you look at a guy like Brandon Crenshaw Dixon, his first year starting. You look at Dom Godino, who tore his ACL the beginning of summer workouts. And I've told him he is a true hero, and his story will live forever with however long I coach. His story will live forever about the man who tore his Achilles tendon and then ended up starting the bowl game and then playing other games and being a valuable member of that offense. I think you look at Chris Martinez and the season that he was able to have. And of course, you'd be remiss if you didn't mention the fact that Alamo Luave and Bill Dunkel and Zach Thomas making all conference teams and Bill Dunkel making second team AP All-American. I think that it's a testament to how hard they worked, and they bought into what I was trying to teach them from the standpoint of they had Coach Schmidt for a long time, and to come in and just adapt to my style of coaching and my techniques and how I approach meetings and how I approach practices and games, and to go out there and be an efficient unit out there was a true testament to them.
You mentioned a lot of guys that were on the line and played and started. All but two of those guys are gone, either through draft, graduation, transfer. You're coming into this season with only two guys that have more than 36 snaps at the FBS level. I asked Coach Hoke at a press conference whether that concerned him, and he said no, made him more anxious because he's eager to see how the young guys are going to develop and who's going to earn those spots. How do you approach that as you're heading into this next season?
While I will miss all the seniors and those that have left, I think that I am so excited for these young men to take the reins and develop their own sense of style. I think that when you look at the youth of this unit, it's their chance to whatever identity they want to be known as amongst their peers and amongst the Mountain West and amongst the opponents that we face out of conference. It is their chance to develop that really from the ground up. And I think it's so important that you have someone like an Alamo Luave who is there to lead the way. And you have Brandon who, while not a seasoned veteran, he is by this group's standard, but he is a guy that again, it's awesome for them that they get the chance to be true leaders. And sometimes I feel what happens is when you have an elder group, especially in college, there's always some guy who might have his vision of how the group should be ran or how things should go amongst themselves. But now this is a chance for a young group to form its identity and work together in building that identity. And I think that the opportunity to play is more possible now than it was a year ago, because you have, with the exception of 2 people, open spots. So go ahead and compete, go get that job. And then once you get that job, you have to understand that getting there isn't the hard part. Keeping the job and staying there, that's when the work really gets hard. And that's one of the things I try to relay to them about my time in the NFL is getting the NFL is not as hard as it used to be. You can find an invitation to a camp, or there's more exposure, more ways to get there. But once you get there, how do I stay there? Because next to being a husband and dad is the greatest thing I ever got to do. No offense to the coaching profession, but it is amazing playing on the NFL level. But the hard part is people are always trying to take your job, and you have to take that approach that, awesome. I used to look at a GM and say, I hope you don't waste a draft pick on a guard because he's not taking my spot. And that's the kind of mentality that you have to have. And I think what's great is now these kids are going to understand that there isn't a Zach Thomas that the left tackle has to compete for. Chris Martinez is not with us. He went to Arizona State, so that spot is open. Bill Dunkel is going to the draft. Bill Dunkel is going to the combine. That spot is open. BCD, you have to understand that, hey, yes, you started there last year, but it is now your job to make it difficult to replace you. And same thing with Alma, but Alma is one of those special things where you get a seasoned center. That's a valuable commodity to have.
So then, in these, the brief 15 practices that you get in spring, what part of that are you most focused on being able to form?
I just want them to develop a mentality, and I want them to be technically sound, because at the end of the day, we go play Utah week 3 up in Utah. That is an unbelievable environment, and they got some grown-ass men that are on that defense. And so there's going to be guys that are in their 21, 22 years old that they're going to be going against 18 and 19-year-old young men. And so they're going to have the more mature bodies than those of them who are still maybe getting rid of the baby fat and still, growing themselves. And so the thing that you need to do is you need to understand your technique, and you need to trust the technique, and you got to understand the schemes and the concepts of plays, because while, yes, you might be going against someone that is older, maybe more developed from a body standpoint, if you trust your technique and you understand what the concept of the play is and what you're trying to do, then it doesn't matter what they do. You just got to do your job by using the technique that you're taught. So those 15 practices are going to be very technically sound for me from that standpoint of, I understand, especially going against our defense, that we're not going to win every rep. I mean, that is a foregone conclusion, and that's fine, because I think going against our defense helps these young men get used to all the different kinds of movement and just a different variety of front still see. And I think that is going to be a great learning opportunity for them. And I think it's going to be great for this group to develop this mentality.
And earlier you were mentioning some of the differences between you and Mike Smith and just your techniques you were just speaking about as well. How much of that was because you were a sectional championship in wrestling in high school? I mean, how did you get into wrestling, and, just what part of that helped you in being an offensive lineman and now in his coaching?
Well, I got into wrestling because I stunk at basketball. My freshman year, I was the guy that, how many fouls does Goff have? He has 5. Go have him go foul people and see if they can't, be a distraction. All right, cool. I did my job. And then my sophomore year, I was trying to think of something else to do, and the wrestling coach just suggested, hey, come out to wrestling. What can it hurt? And I didn't love it at first. I kind of just, I did wrestling more as a hobby, and it was something that kept me in shape. And then as I started to understand just the different points of leverage and just really the mentality of it's you versus no one else. You have a coach who's on the side who's going to scream instructions to you, but you're the one who has to execute it. There's nobody coming to your aid. And I think if you learn those valuable lessons of how you have to win the one-on-one battles, you hear that said all the time by head coaches in their press conferences, winning the one-on-one battles. I think that young men who do get into wrestling know that more than most, because you're out there on a mat all by yourself and there's nobody there but you. And you really have to lean on your abilities. You have to understand your strengths. You have to understand your weaknesses. And then when you take those and you understand that, you can navigate yourself into hopefully into a winning strategy, whether by pin or by points.
Before we get into kind of an assessment on some of the offensive linemen for the season, a couple non-football related stuff that we saw when we were researching you. Back when you played for the Chargers, you had long hair. In 2007, you cut your hair and donated to Locks of Love. Can you talk about why that was something you wanted to do?
When I first got out here in 2004, I didn't know. I knew Tim DeWhite. I knew Lorenzo Neal, Steve Foley, to name a few that I just kind of met. And through Tim DeWhite, I just kind of got a good group of friends. And I remember one of the friends she was growing her hair long. I said, "Oh, you're growing your hair long. That's cool." She said, "Yeah, and then I'm going to cut it." I said, "Oh, what are you cutting it for?" She told me. And I said, "Well, that sounds like a really cool idea." And I figured, hey, why not? So let's give that a shot. And so from 2004, 5, 6, and then before the start of the 7th season, I grew it out and we got it cut together. And it was a cool deal. It was something to do. And once I heard about what the actual charity was and what they did, I was all in. And I actually ended up doing it one more time, but I fear that if I did it now, my wife and daughter wouldn't necessarily care for the long hair. And I don't know if anybody wants to have a graying wig. Maybe they do. I don't know. But I would have to get clearance from my wife and daughter.
Sounds very understandable. I also read that your nickname is Chef because you learned how to cook watching the Food Network. Is that accurate? And what's your specialty dish?
Well, I don't know if I really have specialty dishes anymore because I just love cooking everything. But if you've ever experienced a winter in Cincinnati, it sometimes can get, it can get quite cold there. And I remember one warm, balmy, probably 10-degree night watching the Food Network because I couldn't find where the remote control was. And Emeril Lagasse gets on there and he's making this dish, and I'm like, wow, that looks amazing. So I wrote down all the ingredients on the part of my crossword puzzle that wasn't the puzzle, and I went to Kroger, got all the ingredients, didn't write any directions down, said, all right, how hard can this be? So I made it, slaved away at it, and I tasted it, and it was terrible. And I'm like, okay, obviously I screwed up somewhere. And so did a little research. It's probably about 10 o'clock at night. Kroger's open 24 hours. So I took my butt back out into the 10-degree night, went back to Kroger, bought the same ingredients and made it again and said, okay, that's better. And I think I was hooked ever since. So that was probably back in 2002, maybe 2001, and I've been hooked ever since. And my specialty used to be kind of a twist of a Creole tomato soup with homemade little mini grilled cheese, or you can do a nice little Parmesan crisp that you can dip into the tomato soup. But obviously last couple of days it's very much been soup weather. But other than that, maybe more gazpacho at this point for a majority of the seasons here in San Diego.
So going into just a little bit about the players in the room, part of only having 2 of them come back, no one's seen them play and no one's seen, what they can do. So if you could give us a little bit of a scouting report we'll ask a leading question to the player and, go from there. First one is Ross Lugalu Masouli. He was someone that Coach Hoke repeatedly talked about last year, played late in the year in some mop-up duty. What is he working on in camp, and what should fans be paying attention with him?
Well, I think that the thing about Ross is that he has that natural instinct as a football player. And I think that one of the things that you can't coach is natural instinct. And so when you look at Ross and just even when you're working with him out on the practice field like I did last year, even though he wasn't, didn't get much playing time until the end, you could just see how he moves and how he plays, that he loves the game. Okay. When you have someone who loves the game, you automatically can expect great things to come from him. And I think that him being an instinctual player and how he moves, how he understands the game, he asks questions is an invaluable thing to have. And I think that he does, I think maybe not right away, but I do think he will have some leadership, some natural leadership built into him, and a guy who can play for a long time. And I think when you got that, and he just, he's a bulldog out there, and it's tremendous. So if we put him in at the right spot, you're just getting maybe a shorter Bill Dunkel. Okay, you're getting a guy who loves playing football and is going to go out there and try and maul people.
That is high praise. Kyle Trombley was somebody that coaches mentioned last spring and the fall as the third upperclassman in the room. How is he going to be counted on in 2022?
Well, I right now I look at him as kind of like my Swiss Army knife. And I think that he has – last spring I moved him to every single position, and he was able to get things done at all those positions. And so I think that the main thing about Kyle is get him out in the field and let's see where he best fits. And I think sometimes when you do have a young group, sometimes young players, they don't quite understand maybe what it's like to play through pain, whether you're hurt versus injured. And I think when you have an upperclassman, someone who's been around the program for a while, he understands what to expect. And he's that guy who you can just kind of count on to be able to fill in really at all five positions. And so that's a valuable, very valuable asset to have.
Tommy Mirabella, he answered the bell last year to learn how to play center. Is that something that's is he going to stick at center, or is he potentially going to be learning some other positions this spring?
Well, I think first of all, Tommy's having a hell of a winter. I think Tommy is busting his butt, and it is awesome. Love Tommy Mirabella because he won't say boo. We're actually starting to get him. He's actually starting to, he'll actually, answer in a couple sentences instead of one word. So we're getting him out of his shell, but he's awesome. It's important to him. And I think that at the end of the day, you have to groom somebody because you can't keep all of them forever. And I think that the opportunity for him is that he's so young and he's learned from a seasoned veteran that it can only help him. And yeah, you just naturally got to groom that person. Now, can I put Tommy in at guard? Yes, because you're moving one spot over, moving back a little bit. My O-line coach in Cincinnati used to say that every person should play center for 3 snaps to understand how hard it is. And I think Tommy, if you moved him to guard, would be just fine. But right now, it's all about grooming the heir apparent to Alma, because it's going to happen after this year, whether we like it or not.
And then Christian Jones, there was a video posted on Twitter following the Frisco Bowl showing him helping equipment staff, putting stuff away. I think it was chairs or a table. He didn't want to bring attention to himself, but when you're 6'9", 350, it's kind of hard to not have people notice you. Seems like a terrific person and teammate. What does he bring to the room in terms of chemistry?
He first of all, he is one of the nicest human beings on the planet. And if the planet was made of more people like him, it wouldn't be the hot mess that it has times to be. And just his positivity and his, just his being is an attribute to the room. And I think that when you are his height, what you see is the potential in him. And it just is one of those things that he reminds me of Zach Banner, who I coached up at USC when I was a GAQC up there. And very, very similar attributes. But the thing about him is he is willing to work. It's important to him. I mean, had a 3:15 meeting. He was there at 1:45. I asked him what he was doing. He said, I'm just here waiting. And again, you get those kind of kids and you want them to succeed. He is the kid that you are willing to do whatever it takes to make him succeed just because of the kind of person that he is. And when you have that kind of guy who's willing to make changes to his body, we asked him to lose his weight. I don't think he's even close to being 350 right now. I think he's, his body is coming into his own. He starts to learn how to maneuver, because that's a big frame. Once he gets to maneuver it, I mean, the potential is unbelievable for someone like Christian. And again, you can't take away from what kind of person he is. So he's definitely one of those guys that, if not this year, he's setting himself, as long as he stays the course and continues to work hard, you never know where he could go.
Xavier Leonard, he was another player who saw some action at the end of 2021. In that little time, he, played tackle, seemed to show some really good athleticism, a good burst. Is what sets him apart at the position, and where do you think he'll be competing in fall camp? Camp?
Right now, coming into the spring, I see him competing for that left tackle spot. I think that between him and I'm assuming you'll probably ask me about Jonathan Harrison later, but it'll be a competition between him and Jonathan Harrison. Again, the same thing that about Xavier. Xavier is of that same kind of mold as Christian Jones, who is just a good person to have in a room. He asks questions. He pretty much keeps his mouth shut, and he works hard. And I think being from Texas, football is what he knows, and he wants to be a good football player. So when you coach him, he says, yes, sir. And then he tries to get it done. And I think when you have that kind of mentality of, I don't know, so I'm going to ask. And then if I'm doing something wrong and I am getting coached, I'm going to do whatever I can take to correct it. I think also another positive thing about Xavier is I think that he's one of those guys that's a good hybrid to, if he could probably play both tackle and guard. So I think I always try to encourage. Well, I don't encourage, I force them, because I can do that, to play more than one position. And so with the exception of maybe a true tackle, I don't really mess with them very much. But especially if you're a younger player, I'm going to get you to try to do other things. Because, hey, you know what? Say you get beat out at one position, but another position's struggling. Well, let's put you in there and see what you can do. Because at the end of the day, and I'm sure you have heard Coach Hope say this probably a million times, probably just in the one interview you did with them, is that the best players are going to play. And if it has to be where Xavier, even though I see him competing at the left tackle spot, needs to move into guard, then so be it. I'll let him compete in there. And if it's on the other side, so be it. At the end of the day, it's a competition. And like I told you guys before, that's one of the beautiful things about this situation is these young guys are in a situation where they can push each other. And it's not one of those things where someone's 4 years older and has 36 starts like Zach Thomas had. And so your situation is, how bad do you want it, and what are you going to do to go grab it? And then once you do grab it, what are you going to do to keep it?
We will be asking about Jonathan Harrison later, but before then, another local guy, Josh Simmons, obviously a biggest recruit of the 2021 class. People are definitely wondering how he's doing. How has his progression been since he came on campus, and what could you speak about him?
Yeah, I mean, Josh might be one of the most athletic people I've ever been around. Just how he moves his feet and how he operates is, I mean, it's freakish how he can move. All right. So now our job, between Coach Crum and Coach Bernardi and myself, is to get him to get that athletic body moving in the direction that will help benefit him. And the thing about him is that he can get himself in and out of situations just with his feet. And that's one of the main things I like to stress is footwork. And his footwork is unbelievable. All right. Now we just need to get it to where it's more polished instead of more just kind of limbs flying all over the place sometimes. Try and get it to where it is in a smoother manner and gets things going in the right direction. But Josh's progression, just from the little amount that I've gotten to work with him just this winter versus how we ended the season last year, he's starting to get there. He's starting to understand different concepts of what we're trying to get him to do. And he's asking questions now instead of last year. Maybe just, sometimes I think freshmen get in this mindset of, well, I'm just redshirting, so I don't have to know anything. I can just kind of do my thing. Well, now I think he understands the situation of being a young guy, and your opportunity is now. And again, he is one of those kind of Swiss Army knives that I think you could move him from tackle to guard and vice versa. Right now, I see him competing as the backup right tackle right now behind Brandon. But again, you never know. No one ever likes to talk about injuries or by things that happen. But if things happen, I think he's athletic enough that he can go right to left and not have it matter from an athletic standpoint at all.
Joey Wright, he's another high-profile recruit. He enters his third year in the program. Where do you see his position fitting in the puzzle?
Well, right now I see him competing for the right guard spot. Right now I kind of see him and Ross Masouli competing for that right guard spot. This is a big spring for Joey. This will be our second year together, and it's time for him to kind of start to make his mark. And because the time is now. I think, again, sometimes I think younger players take longer because they're not really – they kind of know they're not going to be relied on at that point. Well, now there is no point. The point is we're all young with the exception of all of them. And so it is if you truly want to make your mark, now's your time to go. And I will say that, again, from where we ended the fall really with bowl practice to now, I think that Joseph has made tremendous strides. Now he just needs to translate what he does in drills onto the field. And watching some of spring ball just from last year, I see the difference in him, and he just needs to continue to find that extra gear and push himself to be the best version of himself.
And then Jonathan Harris, as we mentioned him earlier, he's a local product. He was the backup to Zach Thomas pretty much most of the year last year at left tackle. Obviously, Zach Thomas started every game, but what are you expecting from him coming into this season?
Again, he kind of falls under the same Joey Wright mold, and I think that's one of those things where you've been in the system now for a while. Things are expected of you, and it's time for you to make your mark. And if you truly want to earn that spot, what I love about it is right now I have them competing against Xavier Leonard, and they're both not that far in age. So they both know that they're competing against someone their own age. They're not really competing against a Zach Thomas. And so I think Jonathan Harrison has to take that next step and understand that, this is a very, even though it's considered a game, it's a very serious game. It's very serious what we do. And people have visions and dreams of going to the NFL or, winning Outland trophies or being up. They have to understand that it is an everyday process. J.J. Watt said rent is due every day. And that's the thing that, someone like Jonathan Harrison, I think, again, now understands the opportunity. Now, how is he going to make his mark and achieve the opportunity that's in front of him? He much like Joshua Simmons, has unbelievable footwork. We just need to get him all kind of just moving in the right direction. And again, I think it's a great problem to have, where you can keep repeating yourself, saying, even though we're young, from just working with them a little bit from the past couple of weeks to where we left off in the fall, and you see improvements, that's a good problem to have. So at the end of the day, we might be young, but we're young and we're athletic and we're able to, we're making different, it's going to be a different group than last year, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. We just need to get them all moving on the right direction.
Transfer Cade Bennett, we were able to talk to him before he got onto campus. Just looks like, again, another one of those maulers, guys who just really enjoy playing football. But what did you see from him that made you decide to offer him as a transfer?
We were looking for that body that could come in and compete. And when we looked at his film and we found out more about him, and just talking on the phone with him and getting a chance to know him. And then, of course, when his mom and dad came with him on his visit, getting to sit down, he's a guy you want in a room, because, again, you want to surround yourself by people who football is important to them. You don't have to be the best football player in the world, but if it's important to you, you're going to make a contributing factor somehow. And Cade Bennett right now, I have competing at the left guard spot. And I think what that does is that kind of helps with a little bit of depth with both Chris Martinez and Joey Capra going in the transfer portal. And so I think what it does is it fills a great void by someone who comes from a really good program, the Oklahoma State. And Coach Gary Bernardi knows their O-line coach. And anytime you can get we really didn't want to lose them from the other school, that's a win-win. And I think that just watching Cade in meetings and how he takes notes and how he has a grasp for understanding of how things are going and how he participates, and he just gets it. You ask him a question, if he doesn't know, he doesn't wait to tell you he doesn't know. He's not gonna BS around. He's just gonna tell you, I don't know. Yeah, and then he writes it down, and then the next time you ask him the same question, it's like he doesn't even bat an eye. He understands it, and he's ready to go. And so I think that what he brings is he brings an instant competitor, an instant body that is not a high school kid, but someone who's coming from a Big 12 program to come in, compete for a starting job, and go make his mark. And he's another younger player. So he has a possibility to hold that spot for a long time. And so I'm looking for him to come in, and, as he gets to, he's only known these other teammates for about a month, but as he continues to develop, I anticipate him really taking on a leadership role as well.
Brandon Crenshaw Dixon, he had a relatively uneventful first season. And by that, I just mean that laymen like myself couldn't see huge glaring mistakes that he made. You've already kind of mentioned that, you don't see him sliding over to left, staying at right tackle. Why would that move of staying at right tackle and maybe not going to the blind side be the best move for him, even though he's your most experienced at tackle?
Well, I think at certain points you got to be realistic. And part of that realism is understanding that left tackles are built differently than right tackles. And what I mean by that is that their athletic ability, they both might look the same, but one might just move different than the other. And right now, I think Brandon has a chance to be an unbelievable right tackle and be a stronghold in that spot. And so I think right now, whereas with Zach was a 6th-year senior when we moved them to left tackle, and he made the move seamlessly. But he had also been playing and had established himself as a starter before he did that. So for him, it was an easy transition. So I feel like with what we have on the line, I mean, there's going to be a new tackle regardless. And so why not have Brandon go where he and sometimes an offensive lineman having an uneventful year is eventful. And so, sometimes when you're an old lineman, when people know who you are, that's not usually a good thing. 9 out of 10 times, that's a bad thing. That one time it's really good, but 9 out of 10 times if people know who you are, it's not good. And so for him to set him up for success, it would be one of those things. Let's see how it goes. And again, it's nothing is ever written in stone. Everything is always written on with a dry erase marker in the football world. And it just is, if things aren't going right, we need to make a change, then we adapt and we make that change and see how it goes. But for right now, him being the best version of himself would be keep him at right tackle so he can really take a huge step forward, because that's what Zach Thomas did. Zach Thomas took a step forward at the right tackle spot. And then when Spalding left, he went over to left tackle and filled the void. And so, who knows? Am I saying that, BCD will never go to the left side? I'm not saying that. But right now, why not go with what he's comfortable with? And that's where he has had, he had a really good first year. And I'm excited to see what he does with another year under his belt. And plus, he's going to be playing next to somebody new. And if you move him to the left, he'd be playing next to somebody new. But at least if he stays on the right side, he's playing in a spot that he's comfortable with and what he knows like the back of his hand.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So last but not least is Alamo Luave. Given the youth of the team, how important was he that he decided to come back for a super senior season?
You can't really. First of all, he is an unbelievable young man. He's awesome. He's one of those guys that you hope your daughter dates. And he's that guy who, when he decided to come back, he's that guy who you knew needed to go ahead and fill in that spot that's so valuable when it comes down to it. I mean, the center position is, and it doesn't matter what league you are or what level you are. The center position is one of those spots that you got to have someone who has complete understanding of what they're doing, complete understanding of the system, complete understanding of the concepts, and he has to know what everything is happening behind him. So when you get a chance to have someone come back who has that understanding, you really, I guess you could put a price on it, but it'd be a very high price. And again, it gives Tommy Marabella, if Tommy Marabella would have had to been the guy this year, do I think he would do it? Absolutely, because that's my job to train him to be able to come in if something should happen. But just the more that Tommy gets to develop and get his, mature body-wise and mind-wise, and then he understands it like the back of his hand. I'm almost harder on Tommy than I am Alma, because Alma is that important. If he goes down, we'll go ahead and pop Tommy in. And Tommy you can't miss a beat. That's the one position you really can't miss the beat, because it's the most important position on the field, because you're the one who gets the play started. And it all starts with the snap.
Coach, this is incredible. We thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Was awesome. We'll have you back on hopefully another time. We can talk about how all these players are looking in the fall.
We should do this on the road and go grab beers and do it. So awesome.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Paul, what do you think about the conversation we had with Coach Mike Goff?
I thought it was a great conversation. Life goals, have somebody who speaks about me the way that Mike Goff speaks about the offensive line in his room. He's clearly in the right profession. When you're able to speak with such glowing terms about these kids, you could tell that it was authentic. And I just thought that was really special. I obviously appreciated, as we're, trying to get a good hold of what the 2022 Aztecs will be. He was very forthcoming with, who's going to be playing where, what positions they were going to be on, things of that nature, who's competing. So I thought it was, it was an eye opener. And, was obviously greatly appreciated. What about you?
It was incredibly insightful to hear him talk about each player, where he's thinking they're going to fit in on the depth chart and position-wise. Obviously, a lot's going to change, and between spring camp, summer, and fall camp, none of what he said is going to mean is set in stone. But it's nice to know, kind of going into next spring camp, where they're thinking about guys and where guys need to step up and fill their roles. So that's really good. And he seems like he's very excited about the youth of the team. We could look at it on paper and say, it's concerning that there's only 2 guys that have more than, 36 snaps at FBS. But both Coach Hoke, when I asked him about it at our press conference, and Coach Goff, they look at it more very optimistic, very, excited about that opportunity. And I think that's because of how much they believe in those young guys. I don't think they would make the comments that they've made without having that confidence. Or they would have gone out and gotten more experience on the transfer market, or they would have maybe tried to keep some of those guys who transferred, who were starters last year or main backups. So I'm excited because I think they're excited and they're eager to have the young guys show what they're made of.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's hard because we obviously don't know them personally, and the coaching staff, and so it's sometimes difficult to always be able to read into what they're saying. But I have taken Coach Hoke and now Coach Goff. I've taken their comments more like they're trying to instill belief in these young guys. And if you're trying to instill something, I think it's just a sign that it's not there. Coach Hoke has talked about getting transfers at running back and transfers at D line. And it's like, well, those 2 positions are the 2 deepest positions on the team. And if it's probably not by accident that those are the 2 that he chooses to talk about. And so I thought it was very insightful how Coach Goff presented the challenge that's in front of this offensive line, that they have the opportunity to make their own identity, to be the offensive line that they want to be. And so I thought that was just interesting. I thought it was interesting that he's saying, look, this is your time to go get it. He spoke repeatedly about that it was time for certain players to step up. It was time for them to take things a little bit more serious, that they maybe at times when there were those older players on the roster that maybe they weren't as focused and as disciplined, or maybe lasered in on like asking questions and fine tuning things. I don't want to say like they were slacking off or anything. He definitely did not imply that, but they're questioning more. He said they're looking for ways to improve. And so I think that, that yes, they're excited. Yes, that they see the talent. However, I think that right now on the roster, they have 14 offensive linemen. I should say they have 11 right now on the roster, 3 more coming in the fall for 14. And I just don't know if that's enough offensive linemen to be able to get through a season. They've had upwards of 20 the last 2 years. Mike Goff, when he was at Western Kentucky, they had 16 each of his last 2 years. And so he was telling us about, who was competing at all the spots. I think he only mentioned one person for left guard. And I don't think that's because that's his position for sure. So it will be interesting to see how all of that shapes up. And if enough of these players rise to the challenge that their coaching staff has said and forces them to not need anybody else, right? Because that's how he started. I mean, he started saying that the mindset you need to have is not just, I have the opportunity, but you got to earn that opportunity every day. And I think it was JJ Watt. I think he made the quote from JJ Watt saying, every day I need to go earn my paycheck. And so I think that's the mentality he wants them to have. That's the mentality that he had as a professional. And, we'll see if they make it to where bringing somebody else in is completely unnecessary because they play really well over the 15 practices in spring.
The offensive line out of any position in football is the hardest to fully assess because there's no stats, right? Every other position has some sort of a stat you could point to and say, this guy played well, this didn't play well. Not that statistics are the end all be all. Offensive line, you could look at, the Pro Football Focus grades and use that, but that's also just one metric. But we can look back on 2021 and say, did the offensive line perform exceptional? And I don't know if the answer to that would be yes. So when you lose 6 out of your top 8 offensive linemen, you could say, well, would you have rather had a couple of those guys stay over some of the younger guys? And I think that's going to be a nice determining to see, would you rather have Chris Martinez at left guard, or would you rather have Cade Bennett? Would you rather have Joey Capra filling in at right guard, or would you rather have Joey Wright or one of the other guys that's mentioned? So that's another part of the aspect is the guys that did transfer, did they transfer because they made the decision? Were they told, hey, we're going to have all these other guys that are going to be vying for your spot and your starting position isn't guaranteed next year. And so sometimes when players transfer out, it's not necessarily a sign that, they're not happy or they want to move on. Sometimes the school, makes it clear to them that their spot's not guaranteed. So a lot to be determined. And I think the offensive line is going to be a big part of how successful the team is in 2022.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, to answer your question, do I think they would be better if Capra and Martinez were still on the team? Without a doubt. And if these other players beat them out and they were the depth, you still feel better because people are going to miss time. They're going to miss their opportunities to be able to, they're going to miss their opportunities to play all of the snaps, etc. So yeah, I think they would be better if those people had stayed. Arizona State certainly thought that Chris Martinez was a pretty darn good player, right? And I think that some people had ideas that maybe he wasn't up to that high level. And then he signs with the Pac-12 school. Now everyone's going, no, he played well. He played well last year. Joey Capra, the fact that he's going to be playing in the conference, and I don't think he has any teammates on Nevada because they all went and left to Colorado State. But they're all going to come together and form a new team, I guess, there in Reno. So I think that the line is going to be, along with, quarterback, of course, it's going to be the big question mark on this team, because it doesn't matter by and large who is going to be running the ball if they can't block up front. The offensive line was elite sometimes. And when they were elite, the team was good and the offense could move the ball. When they weren't, well, then you saw what happened there as well. And so it's that consistency. I think it's exciting to just be able to see, because if they are good, and they meet the expectation that their coaches have for them, this line could be really good over the next few years as they get bigger and they fill out and stuff. And they, gain experience. And, you talked about how athletic and getting their feet all moving in the right direction. And they learn all of those things. They get those tricks to the trade. Of the players that he, obviously we went through the entire room that's going to be there in spring camp. Who excited you the most that Coach mentioned?
Ross Ulugalu Masouli.
Yeah.
I think that guy is going to be the next great offensive lineman at San Diego State. No doubt in my mind. Hearing Coach Goff talk about him, hearing Coach Koch talk about him towards the end of the season, he didn't get many snaps in the Frisco Bowl, but he got enough. He just looks like the prototypical, right guard in college, next level. He's definitely the guy that excited me. The other guy that I was not necessarily thinking of too much was Joey Wright. He spoke very highly of Joey Wright. Actually, I think he mentioned Joey Wright was working with on the right guard as well. I was
going to say, so you're really excited about the right guard competition.
Yeah. So I think the right guards. I think both of those guys are are the guys. But to answer your question, I think Ulubala Masouli seems like that guy that's destined for that elite spot.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the praise that he gave him, and in fairness, he was the first offensive lineman that we used, and so maybe he was waxing eloquent at the beginning, and then as he went down, he wasn't quite as verbose. But he said that he was a shorter-willed uncle.
Yeah,
that's pretty damn high praise. And he said that he can play this game for a very long time. And so that is talking about his professional career, right? And so that's pretty special. I think the people that jumped out to me, Christian Jones, he is a person whose social media personality seems to reflect what Coach Goff was talking about. That him going and helping the equipment staff put away everything in the Frisco Bowl, that was pretty neat. But it was just, I think he said, Coach Goff said that if the world was filled with Christian Joneses, there would not be as many problems in the world. And I thought that was really neat. I thought that was a great line. And, as we've seen with the kids that we've interviewed for the podcast and talking to different former players and et cetera, there's a lot of these types of people running around up on the Mesa. And so I thought it was great to see him get his due. Also pretty excited that he's not anywhere close to 350. And so that's really excited that he's getting his body the way that it needs to be. I thought it was a great idea that Brandon Crenshaw Dixon is going to stay at right tackle. I think we've spoken on this before, but there's no reason to mess with a good thing. I like Goff's comments that said, if you don't want to be known as an offensive lineman, that's a good thing. That's a great thing. And that was my point, right? That was my point in that question, was like, I didn't notice BCD, which I didn't want to notice him, and so now as he builds off of that and can then not get noticed for the bad things, but can start building off of that, having that comfort level, I think it's a really smart move, keeping him at right tackle. And nothing's set in stone, but I thought that was really, really good. And then the last one was Alamo Luave. I think he said he's the kind of kid that you would want your daughter to date. And if there's a hope that this offensive line can outperform what happened last year, it's because of his leadership. He doesn't play left tackle, which I think is really, really significant. He plays in the center. He's going to be the guy who's going to get everyone lined up. He's going to make sure that what the quarterback is communicating to them in terms of shifting the where they're going to be blocking, that's communicated well. He's going to be the person who's on the sidelines making sure everyone is where they need to be. He's going to be that anchor, and I think it's really important that he was able to come back at center. And I don't think there could have been a better position for your super senior to come back when you have such a young line. And so I thought that was pretty significant.
Going back to Crenshaw Dixon in the right tackle spot, you hit on this, but Coach Goff said, we're already trying to replace 3 starters on the line. If we move BCD to left tackle, essentially we now have 4 new starters on the line, which is obviously a lot. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a great comment on his part. Keep him at right tackle for this year. He's going to play next to somebody new on right guard, but at least he's going to be comfortable, and he can help that right guard assimilate himself. And then, he left open the possibility that he could move over to left tackle, in the future. So I thought that was definitely interesting. The other one thing I will mention is Josh Simmons. Right. He came in highly recruited, Alabama offers, 4-star, and we didn't see him much on a depth chart or anything. And I think Coach Goff mentioned about how he was figuring stuff out and how he's moving towards that and he's progressing. It didn't sound to me like Simmons is going to be a big player this season, unless things drastically change in spring camp. Did you get that sense as well?
Yeah, that was definitely my impression. I think he talked about him being the backup to Crenshaw Dixon at right tackle. But again, he says he's good enough to play anywhere. And I think he came in as a guard. He did say that he's the most athletic person he's ever seen. That's crazy because, Mike Goff has been around some pretty good football players in his career. So, yeah, I think you get a lot of questions. We get a lot of questions about Simmons because of that. I thought Jonathan Harrison, another, local guy who is just, he's at that place where he's going to make a name for himself or he's not. And then the last guy I would mention would be Tommy Marabella. It's not easy for you to go to somebody and say, here's what I want you to do. I want you to learn how to snap. And we got this veteran guy, and you're not going to see the field for a few years unless he gets hurt, which would be like disastrous for us. Like, we don't want to see you play, Tommy Marabella. Like, it's not something that we want. He did it, and he's continuing to do it. And he's going to, again, you got to be a special person to be able to do that. And he's going to pull what he needs off of from learning underneath from their best offensive linemen, and it's going to make him a better player in the future.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out. But having the insight with Coach Goff was awesome because I feel like we know so much more about where the offensive line is and where each of the individual players are than we did prior to that interview. That's going to do it for us on this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed Coach Goff's interview and a discussion on the offensive line. And we will talk to you next time. You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison.